Welcome, folks. This is Josh Mundy, and we are a podcast for all seasons. This is season 3, episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about DC's Legends of Tomorrow. So they had a 2-episode premiere over the last 2 weeks, and me and Eric are going to go over it. With me, as always, is my co-host Eric Joseph. Eric, let's get started. We're going to try and talk about a few things today. So I'll let you start off, introduce yourself, and get us going.
Hi, Josh, and hi to everybody listening. This is Eric Joseph, as Josh said, and as the title of the episode implies, we're talking DC's Legends of Tomorrow, not just Legends of Tomorrow. Know that Marvel has branded many things with their name on it, at least things that are produced by Disney. DC has now done it with at least one project, though it kind of makes sense because Legends of Tomorrow is Legends of Tomorrow. I threw an extra Z in there, like Zohan or something. I believe it's the first time they've ever used this name for a property, so seeing that it's new, it's not bad to brand the publisher's name on it, even though they're now doing kind of like an anthology comic book called Legends of Tomorrow within the next few months, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the show per se. But you know, it's kind of like having a Justice League on TV of sorts, and we'll expand upon that in a minute. Also in this episode, we plan to talk a little bit about the new Suicide Squad trailer that debuted last week. But of course, at the top of our agenda, Legends. Personally, I thought this was really good, especially for a pilot, because sometimes pilots, they do a great job of establishing a series, but they're not the best episode of the season. Like if I think back, Smallville, its pilot episode did a great job of establishing the early portions of that series, and I still think the Smallville pilot was the best episode of season 1. Whereas with Arrow, I think that had a very good pilot, but probably not the best episode of season 1. Flash certainly had a great debut, but that was not the best episode of its first season because that show only kept improving. I mean, we've still got many episodes of Legends to go. I don't know if Legends season 1 is slated to be 13 or 16 episodes. I've read both, but either way, we're not going to get 23 episodes as we do with other CW shows because, of course, this premiered at mid-season. But dividing it into a 2-part pilot certainly wasn't a bad idea because we're dealing with 8-9 main characters here. And it's just so grandiose, and to establish the whole time traveling thing. Maybe 10 if you count Casper Crump as Vandal Savage, but I can't remember if they filed him under principal cast or he was under guest stars, because even though he's the big bad for the season, he may not necessarily be in every episode. By the way, we're talking spoilers in this episode because I guess I'm going to say it right off the bat here. Someone who's in the principal cast, Falk Henschel, Hawkman, was killed in episode 2, which took a lot of people by surprise, myself included. Though we don't know if they put him in the principal cast and just threw us a curveball, like saying, "Hey, the stakes are high. We just killed someone in the pilot," or as Josh and I just discussed before the episode, this is a time traveling show, and Hawkman's been reincarnated over 200 times, so they could easily pluck a future version of him or something, and we could see him again at some point. But it did really increase the stakes because now it means that only Hawkgirl can give the true death blow to Vandal Savage. Maybe they'll explain more about how Vandal Savage is not a pile of dust. They said he could be reconstituted from a single cell if it wasn't Hawkman or Hawkgirl giving the death blow, but I hope they get into more detail sometime soon and not just try to take that plot point for granted. But it's great how we're going to get to see more guest shots like Jonah Hex and Connor Hawk, a one-armed Oliver Queen 30 years into the future. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves and just talk about what we've seen so far. But
Right.
I think each character has had their moments, and they've all played well off each other. I think it was almost meta in a way when they said like, "Hey, we're nobodies," and we picked characters that didn't have an effect on the stream because uh, look at it this way: these are the characters they had to work with. A lot of them have been established on Arrow and the Flash, but you can't use Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Cyborg. You can't use Flash or Green Arrow unless you do a crossover episode because they have to be in their own show. So these are the characters they have to work with, and they pretty much address that. But they're working with these characters rather well, and I think every character so far has been used to their advantage. We've seen Ray Palmer as kind of like a genius powerhouse with his Atom slash Iron Man style suit. Uh, Firestorm is also a genius slash powerhouse as well because seriously, he's probably the most powerful character in this cast, and White Canary's very much the ass kicker. I really liked the bar fight scene they had, and Captain Cold and Heatwave really do bring an interesting dynamic, especially Heatwave. He's kind of been the comic relief of the show, and I've really liked the interjections he's had at points. I think Dominic Purcell's really been able to find a character so far in the way that he hasn't been able to on the Flash.
Vandal is very much playing the straight man, like straight comic delivery, Jason Bateman style.
Yeah, I think Casper Crump has really done a great job as Vandal Savage. He's supremely intellectual, very threatening, and let's face it, doesn't he just look like Vandal Savage ripped right out of a comic book?
Exactly.
It's seriously just they did an incredible job casting that guy, and I also think they did a commendable job of recapping what happened in the Flash Arrow crossover that was a backdoor pilot to this. Just having quick cuts to it, getting the plot points across instead of just having a previously on Flash and Arrow. I think they did present it well because there probably were a decent amount of people who were viewing the Legends pilot who may not have seen Flash or Arrow, and that's the attraction of the show. It's essentially a Justice League on TV, and there hasn't been a show like this yet. Even though we've had those Flash Arrow crossovers, and we had the Absolute Justice episode of Smallville, but Titans is no longer happening at TNT, so this is what we have, and it's been a very good offering so far. And they've said it's an anthology style series, so this may be the team we see in season 2. There will be a different big bad. I know they want to kind of have them as self-contained, so we wouldn't see Vandal Savage as the main villain next season. But I know there's talk of CW. It was only a rumor that CW thought Legends was so expensive they would do only one season of it. But if the ratings are there, the advertisers are there, granted, networks a lot more money for pilots and season finales. But there's certainly no way you can do this show on the cheap. But we've seen with Flash and Arrow, they're now giving bigger budgets to shows like this because they certainly have more on the visual effects side than Smallville did, because as people may know, Smallville's budget, despite the fact they did get more grandiose in seasons 8 through 10, when season 8 came along, they were pretty much cut down to the budget of season 1. So Smallville did a good job working with what they had, because if you don't believe me, go back and look at the cinematography of, say, Smallville season 4 or 5 and then look at the sets and cinematography of the latter seasons, you will notice the difference. Um, but especially, I don't know why with not to get sidetracked here, but I don't know why with CBS being a bigger network, even though it's a parent network of CW, why do the visual effects on the Flash look better than the visual effects on Supergirl? Because when they do the aerial battles on Supergirl, I can clearly tell it's green screened and not very well polished. But perhaps that's a conversation for another day. Um, I'll let Josh chime in soon about Legends, and maybe I'll interject a few more of my thoughts. But for now, I'll say this obviously we haven't seen how this develops as a season, but obviously they have a fan in me. But just grading the 2-part pilot, I would say I'd give it a 9. So, what do you think, Josh?
Well, as we talked about before we got on, I was looking at the offerings in terms of like episodic content, because I would have liked to have watched them back to back, which was my original intent, but just time permitting, I had to watch the one episode last week and then watch the other one actually this morning. So one thing is that the first episode, I found that the first episode, based on simply its structure, was not as strong as the second episode, or the second part of the first premiere, for lack of a better way to put it. And what I mean by that is, obviously it's a common trope, and it's a common failing of just about every origin story, is you spend so much time deliberating on the wherefores and the whatnots, and getting everything developed and in its proper place to set up the show, that I think that they did it really well, but it was a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously we're talking about superheroes and time travel, but I don't think that if you haven't seen it yet, you can't really emphasize enough how much of like a sci-fi adventure show this is. It's extremely sci-fi in terms of, we're when you hear things like, people throwing out words like, time masters and things like that, and obviously you have time machines, and people are flying from, Norway to America in minutes, and things like this. You definitely get the feeling that, this is not the somewhat rooted in reality science of, say, Arrow, and it's maybe even way beyond the semi-rooted in reality science of even the Flash. It's like, I think we've moved past like suspension of disbelief, and that's just going to happen with any big thing like that. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there was no misconceptions about the grounded reality of the Avengers, for example. I mean, at that point, we were talking full alien invasion. Up to that point, Captain America is actually quite believable as a sci-fi story, as is even Iron Man, for lack of a better way. I mean, it stands to reason that could exist in a universe. But yeah, then you start getting into multi-team up superheroes, alien invasions, flying ships. It just gets way beyond the pale. In that way, this show is not as grounded as say the Flash or Arrow, but that doesn't mean that it's not as good in terms of its outlay. I think that in terms of first episode, the first episode was strong, but I feel, and I talked with Eric about this, I feel like they almost are trying really, 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 really hard to kind of get across what they're trying to portray. So obviously it's a superhero team up. My example when I spoke with Eric about it is, it's almost like in an episode of The Big Bang Theory, when they try to really emphasize the fact that, hey, these guys are really, really nerdy. It's like, yeah, we get it. The show's been on for 6 seasons now. Granted,
I think it's way farther along than that now.
Whatever. It's been on for several seasons. I'll say that. It's been on for several seasons. It's like, it's been firmly established that these guys are complete and total fucking nerds. But when
I stopped watching Big Bang Theory is a show that laughs at nerds, not with them.
It laughs at nerds, not with them. Yes, we've discussed this before. The thing is, though, is when they do that, you're almost like, okay, guys, you're trying too hard. We get it. They're nerds. Like you don't need to emphasize, like, we don't need to talk about how well all of the cast members speak Klingon to understand that they're nerds. Like, but I felt like they definitely tried a little too hard, and it's an ethereal thing. I guess it's hard to describe in specific examples, but I guess if I had to give a specific example from the first episode, it's just like the whole lead up to when Rip Hunter, who is the time master from the future, he is the guy who's flying around in the ship, and he's the one who gets all our heroes together. When he's kind of describing the past, that actually resonated really, really well. I also mentioned to Eric that I think the Rip Hunter character is really underutilized, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the problem is that I felt like when they were giving this whole disposition or exposition rather about the setup, it felt like they were really, really going for the gusto. Now, I understand why they have to, because it's a very heady concept and they've got quite a bit to establish in a very short period of time, but it almost felt as though, again, they were trying too hard. It's like, hey, this is a superhero team up, and it felt a little bit contrived, but that doesn't mean that it was bad. It's just, I think that the delivery maybe could have been, well, I can't express the ways in which it might have been better, but I think that if anyone sees the first episode versus the second episode, you'll agree with me, because as far as the second episode is concerned, I thought that it was a much better offering. They really kind of nailed down the dynamic. You've already got that backstory established in the one episode. You kind of get the premise. Okay, it's guys flying around in a spaceship well, it's not spaceship, but in a ship through different time periods. Although they pretty much stay in 1975 in the second episode, and they have quite a bit of access to high technology, and also with Rip Hunter's knowledge of the future, he has quite a bit of information as far as things that are supposed to be and have been, because obviously this is his history. So I think that they nailed those things down a lot better. Specifically with regards to the heroics, I thought that even the heroics of all of the characters in the second season, or in the second episode rather, were much better established. It is a much more adventurous and much more exciting action sets and action sequences when they attack. I won't give away every single fact in the show, but they basically go after an object and they end up confronting a bunch of people that they fight. And when they do this, it's some really, really crazy, awesome action stuff. Now, it seemed to me really high budget stuff, but when you take away the special effects, it was really minor pyrotechnics, here and there. It was shot very dynamically, a lot of camera movement and things like that. And what I mean by that is it made for a really great action sequence. But one of the most expensive characters, obviously, to probably make on screen would be the Atom, because of all the special effects involved. A lot of his stuff took place off screen, and then he'd fly in for the occasional shot, letting you know like where all these energy blasts and things like that are coming from. And aside from the special effects of his energy blasts, you don't really see a whole lot from him. Obviously, you have Captain Cold Gun. I think that Dominic Purcell's Heatwave's flames are practical effect. So that's all. That's all that they really needed to really nail down this whole energy that's behind. You get this many people in a team, and it seems like kind of the poor man's Justice League. It's very much the B Squad Justice League, right? Maybe even D Squad. But the reason I mention that is, we were talking that we were gonna discuss Suicide Squad, and we will in a little while. But that whole premise is it's the D Squad. In this case, it's the D Squad of villains, right? It's not even the most well-known villains, although there's a couple well-known villains. It's the D Squad of villains. Like, nobody outside of comic book fandom knows who Captain Boomerang is. Not a single person. Maybe the occasional person knows from pop culture who Killer Croc is because of the animated series, but Nobody knows who Katana is. Nobody knows who El Diablo is. Like Harley Quinn, and that's pretty much it. Deadshot, only maybe because of Arrow. And so these characters, although they're not as unpopular, but yet Firestorm is very similar. No one knows who Firestorm is outside of the comic books, the comic book fandom. The Atom is a little bit more popular because he's been around for a very long time. But again, he's not a huge. He's not a name. He's not a home name. He's not Superman. He's not Batman. He's not even Robin. So without the establishment of these characters already, I think that the show would have been very, very weak. And one of the more popular characters in terms of cultural notoriety is Hawkman, and they kill him, as Eric said, in the very second episode. It was very shocking. Did not see that coming at all, and yeah, it raises the stakes significantly. It lets us know that things are potentially going to get serious. But the second episode, it was better shot. I think that the action sequences were better. I felt like the stakes were higher. And in terms of just the things that they, sorry, my dog's very upset that we're doing a podcast today. One of the things that Eric talked about was the power of the Firestorm. So when they establish, because I think that they need to establish how powerful Firestorm is. In this case, they have a nuclear device. I won't get into it specifically, but let's just say that they show you that he is not only one of the most strong characters that we've seen on any of these shows, he's probably stronger than the majority of them combined. And I really hope that they play up that a lot more, because it will be very, very interesting if they get into some of his powers a little bit more as the show goes on. But as far as my review, I'm getting a little long-winded here, so I'll leave it at that. But second episode definitely was an improvement over the first. It had some great moments from the characters. I felt like the characters really started to gel with one another. As Eric stated, Dominic Purcell's Heatwave, he kind of plays straight man, comic relief. I really like Wentworth Miller's Captain Cold. Obviously, he's been a standout on The Flash, and he will be on this show. Big Brandon Routh fan. I would like if they would do more with the Rip Hunter character, as I stated, but even Victor Garber, I mean, obviously the guy's a great actor, but his Martin Stein character, he's kind of been a throwaway character when he's appeared on The Flash, and I think that they're kind of making him shine a little bit more, giving him a little more dynamic origin and whatnot, a little bit more dynamics to his story. But that being said, I would give it an 8. I'm not going to give it as strong of a rating, about a 9, like Eric, but I'd say maybe 8.5. It was a very good outset. I think it's going to be a really fun season. The anthology thing frightens me a little bit, because it seems like it's a lot of establishment to then do it all again the next season. But I guess we'll have to see exactly what that means when they say anthology. So, Eric, let's move on. You want to take Suicide Squad first?
Yeah, sure. For those who watched the Dawn of the Justice League special last week, that's where they premiered the new Suicide Squad trailer. Technically, it's the first Suicide Squad trailer. The one that at San Diego Comic-Con was just not a sizzle reel, but it was more of a presentation. This is an actual theatrical trailer. It's been divisive for some reason. I still don't get why something that seems so much like the comic book is divisive. I think David Ayer is really going to bring a gravitas to this movie. It certainly looks like it's shot very well, and I don't necessarily want to say more of an auteur style, but it seems that so far what it looks like they're establishing with the DC extended universe, and we've seen that filmmakers in the past, before they had a connected cinematic universe, filmmakers more so put their own stamp on DC characters. Whereas I think many times with Marvel, they just it's more like an assembly line where filmmakers don't quite put their fingerprint on a Marvel superhero movie, at least the ones from Disney. I know a lot of people give me shit for saying that, but they all basically have the same cinematography. Um, they're all really many of them are the same tone. Uh, and people are saying, DC is going to have the same tone. So we know they intend to get a bit more serious, but again, we can't judge an entire line of films by the first few releases. Uh,
We
I
also
I
can't
think
judge them. We also can't judge them based on one release and a trailer or two. I think
yeah,
is
yeah, we went in depth in our last episode. We need to talk about Batman versus Superman, which I feel was one of our best episodes. So if you haven't listened to that, please do so when you're done with this. But Suicide Squad is also kind of suffering from the same things with people maybe not getting too purist, but judging something before they see it because, like, oh, this isn't Harley Quinn. This isn't the Harley Quinn I grew up with. Margot Robbie, pretty much her portrayal of Harley Quinn, I think is spot on. Granted, they're going with the new 52 style origin for her. When she also had a chemical bath, which some people have a problem with. But look at it this way: a lot of the characters we're dealing with from DC have been around for decades upon decades. And like if we're talking Batman and Superman, more than three-quarters of a century now. But nobody is bitching about the fact that Batman doesn't look like how he did in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. Characters evolve over time. I think the fact that Harley Quinn has been around for only 20 some years, people really got attached to her in that jester style outfit from Batman the Animated Series, and now especially since the Arkham games, since the characters evolved more aesthetically, people have taken issue with. But again, I don't really have a problem with it because, like I said, characters don't stay like their original incarnations over the time. In fact, I wasn't much of a Harley Quinn fan until her new 52 series. I don't know if I've talked about it much on the show, but I've always said it in my reviews for the books. Jimmy Palmiotti, excuse me, and Amanda Connor have really made a fan out of me, and they've also had great artists on there, such as Chad Harden. I believe John Timms is the other regular contributor. Not to get too sidetracked, but and then people complaining about how she doesn't have the Brooklyn accent. So what? As long as she still acts like the character. Really, not to knock any other actresses because Harley Quinn has been portrayed by several fine voice actresses since her inception on Batman the Animated Series, such as Tara Strong and Hynden Walsh. But really, everyone's been kind of doing an Arlene Sorkin impression, and I see no reason why Margot Robbie has to sound like Arlene Sorkin. I mean, not a single person. Well, there are people, but uh, why can't Ben Affleck sound like Kevin Conroy, or why can't Jared Leto sound like Mark Hamill or something? Because they're not the actor. I mean, I've heard people on both sides of the fence. As for Troy Baker doing his Joker like Mark Hamill, but when he did Arkham Origins, he did it because he was actually playing the same Joker Mark Hamill was, just younger. Um, so he had to establish that connecting thread. Uh, I We got a sense of Deadshot from this trailer. Um, we've yet to see more of Killer Croc in the others, but I've heard that Killer Croc is going to be kind of comedic relief in a sense. I almost think he's going to be a little bit like how King Shark was in Batman Assault on Arkham, because I don't think Killer Croc's normally a character we associate with the Suicide Squad. Correct me if I'm wrong, But I'm thinking maybe the filmmaker sat down and looked at it and said, like, hey, that King Shark had something, but we don't feel the need to have our lineup copy the animated film. So, let's swap in Killer Croc for him. But again, we always recommend for those of you unfamiliar with the Suicide Squad, watch Batman Assault on Arkham. It's an incredible movie. And Free Comic Book Day this May, they're doing a reprint of Suicide Squad #1 from the New 52. So if you want to familiarize yourself with the concept for the cost of free, go ahead and get to a comic shop near you. I think May 7th is the date this year. But overall, I think the film shows a lot of promise. It looks like it's going to have maybe a bit of whimsy to it, not as much as Guardians of the Galaxy, because I think it was Will Smith that summed it up about this movie. It's not good versus evil, it's bad versus evil. They're kind of sketchy about the Joker's involvement because we still don't know really who the villain is. I kind of think it's the Joker. I think what we've seen of Jared Leto looks good performance-wise, and they've kind of given nods to various Joker looks, like the Alex Ross one. Someone on Facebook made a meme and zoomed in, and if you notice during the scene in which they show Joker laying with the knife circled around him, he actually has a smile painted on his face, and someone thought it was a nod to Jack Nicholson. I think it's actually more so a nod to maybe Cesar Romero, because it looks more like his makeup job, but he also doesn't have the tattoos or the grill, which I think may also support our theory that since this is the Joker that's been around for like 20 years, maybe he's had his teeth knocked out by Batman, hence the grill. And speaking of Batman, I thought it was interesting they left him out of the actual theatrical trailer because he was in the Comic-Con footage, but maybe it's just because Batman has a very small role in this movie, perhaps even for a flashback with the Joker. But let's just never forget that Batman, his WB's golden boy. So maybe they also thought if the movie has the Joker, Batman has to be in it at some point. But I do like that they very much kept the focus on the characters in this movie. And Suicide Squad's gaining a lot of interest. So I really do think WB has a hit on their hands. I'm not sure if it's going to hit the $1 billion mark, but I think it is going to be successful. And I think it is going to be one of the more talked about and successful comic book movies of 2016. I'm not sure if I have any other points to make for now because we're really just talking about a few minutes of footage. So, Josh, what did you think of the trailer?
I thought it was excellent. It definitely was a sizzle reel, for lack of a better way to put it. One of the things that really made it nail in terms of its quality was every single shot was chosen very specifically, and you can tell this when it's time to music. Now, obviously, they're playing off of the Bohemian Rhapsody Queen that they did at the very beginning. That they've got Bohemian Rhapsody playing over the entirety of the trailer. They've got gunshots and brass hitting the ground and explosions and all this, that, and the other timed to the music. And because of that, they definitely had this very I don't want to say unique. I mean that's been done before, but it definitely was a very in-your-face trailer. I thought that it showed some of the characters that people were a little bit concerned about, like specifically Captain Boomerang, Jack Courtney's Captain Boomerang. People were saying that he really kind of stole the trailer. Now, I didn't quite get that, but then again, like I already really like Jack Courtney. I think that he's really underrated. People probably probably say like, yeah, what's he been in that's been good? And I honestly, I don't think I've ever seen him be bad in a movie. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's in great movies. I liked him in Die Hard, the fifth Die Hard movie. It wasn't a spectacular movie. It wasn't a masterpiece, but I think that he did a good job in it. I think he did a good job in Terminator Genesis. And everything that I've seen him in, I think that he definitely shines. He obviously stole the show in this, according to most reviews of the trailer and people on the internet. He kind of blew up. That being said, Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, she's very much Harley Quinn. Anyone who denies that just doesn't know about that character, hasn't seen multiple portrayals of that character. Everything from, is she identical to the character from the animated series? No, that's where a lot of her fan base came from. It's where a lot of her female fans came from. She's insanely popular right now. Her first appearance in comic books, are selling for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, upwards of $600-700 ungraded comic books, and for those who don't collect comics, that's an insanely high cost. And those are the types of numbers that you would see with much more classically popular characters. Those are like Walking Dead numbers, in terms of like very popular characters from that show. It's just she's blown up culturally. I think that she nailed it. Although I'm not absolutely in love with that character, I can admit that she did a fantastic job. She nailed the character completely. One character I thought that was actually a standout and no one seemed to be talking about was El Diablo. Definitely looked pretty interesting. I mean, I'm not extremely familiar with the character, but his pyrokinesis thing was very, very interesting. He looks like he's going to be a powerhouse of the team. So hopefully he'll be a kind of a very cool standout. And then Enchantress looks interesting. I thought that she had a really, really cool look about her. She's kind of got this like pestilence, and she almost looks like Pigpen. She has this pestilence floating around her, possessed by a witch. It's very interesting. I don't exactly know where they're going to go from their character, but again, kind of spoilers. Although if you've seen the trailer, it's not really spoilery, but it's more of an Easter egg. Is one of the shots that we see, she's in the White House. She's got this, the White House, like, panic room or whatever. In the background, we see one of the TVs indicating that she's in the White House. So who knows what's going to happen with that character, but we're not necessarily breaking down plot points so much as we are trailer review. But I really like Joel Kinnaman, who's playing Rick Flag, and I think that he seems to play Joel Kinnaman. I think, was it me and you, Eric, who were talking about that? It might have been me and another friend. But Joel Kinnaman plays Joel Kinnaman. I really like him, but he seems to be pretty static throughout most of his portrayals. He does a good job, and there's no question of that. I think he's really emotive, and he can bring something interesting. Is he as good as Tom Hardy might have been? I don't know. But I think that he'll do a really good job. The only ones that I'm not 100% certain of is, we didn't see enough from Killer Croc. We didn't really see enough from Deadshot. We see that he's a badass. I mean, and it's obviously it's Will Smith. They're going to play up Will Smith being Will Smith. He's Will Smith in every movie he's ever been in. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because Will Smith's really bankable, or at least he has been bankable. He hasn't been bankable in the last 10 years, but he's historically bankable. And I think that means that he'll draw some audience to this film. But I think that it's something that you didn't touch on, Eric, and I don't think that we've even discussed before, and you can agree or disagree, but I think that the thing that this movie has going for it, maybe the most, is the fact that do you know that this is a superhero film? Like, aside from the fact, like, let's say you're the uninitiated, and we've had discussions about the initiated and the uninitiated before this, but let's say that you are just Joe Blow sitting down watching TV. You're watching, a football game, and then this trailer comes on. Okay.
Well, I think when they see the Joker, they'll get it.
Yeah. Aside from the fact of the Joker, that's the only caveat. Aside from the fact that you see the Joker in it, right? And I'm not going to say that he's unrecognizable as the Joker, because he's not. People can say, "Oh, that doesn't even look like the Joker." No. Everyone sees him and they know exactly who he is. Every single person who sees him, the Joker is a cultural icon for villainy. But when you see him, you definitely know who he is. But no one knows. Even people in the large cultural, sociocultural understanding, they don't really know who Harley Quinn is, although she's extraordinarily popular amongst comic book fans. they don't know who she is unless they've seen her in the animated series. They don't know, or they've played the Arkham games. That's the only thing that's giving her any credence, is the Arkham games have made that character also somewhat popular, and those have been extraordinarily successful games. Gaming is extremely popular. But if you're just Joe Blow sitting down there, maybe you watch comic book films, but maybe you're just a atypical American guy and you like action movies. This looks like a really fun, crazy, cool action movie that also happens to be a superhero movie. So you're really nailing two things, but I don't think that the emphasis needs to even be put on the fact that it's quote unquote a superhero movie, or at the very least a comic book movie, for it to really find a successful audience and be a successful movie. And the best way that I can describe this is my dad is that guy. My dad is the guy who he likes absolutely horrible action films because he just likes action films. He doesn't put too much thought into it. He just enjoys watching, cool action sequences and stuff like that. And there are tons of people who think this way. Some of us are a little more analytical, some of us a little more critical. But I think that there's enough people out there who just go and see a big, fun action movie, and those movies become successful regardless of their quality or not. And if you need an example, I give you Iron Man 3. But I think that this movie could be very successful based on those grounds alone. Add in the fact that if people really get the fact that it's a tie-in to the DC universe, they're going to be seeing it after they've seen Batman versus Superman. And I think that is going to give it a whole lot of push. If they do see more trailers and TV spots, people see that it does have Batman in it. Of course, that's only going to boost its sales even more. I'm glad that they let this film stand on its own merits without having an ounce of Batman footage in it. Even though they're showing sequences where we know that Batman filmed stuff, or that they have Batman in the movie. So they definitely could have had him in this film very easily if they wanted to. They did not cut it that way, and I believe it was intentional, simply because they wanted this film to stand on its own two legs. And if it can't, if Thor can't stand on his own two legs as a film, then that there's not going to be Thor 2 and Thor 3. Likewise with Captain America. There is a reason that we haven't seen a Falcon movie, and we're not going to anytime soon, is because Anthony Mackie's Falcon isn't going to stand on his own two legs.
Unless Anthony Mackie becomes Captain America.
Anthony Mackie becomes that's the only exception. I mean, Ant-Man is a one-off. I mean, yes, we're gonna get a Ant-Man sequel, but I think you need an exceptionally. I think you need a very good story, but more than that, you need a very compelling character, and you need a compelling actor to portray that character. Now, me and Eric don't completely disagree on Ant-Man, but that is a one-off. That is an outlier, and it is not. The rule does not make the exception. That is the exception to the rule. That if these characters are not interesting and dynamic, then we're not going to care about them. Now, who knows if we'll ever see a sequel to Suicide Squad? Now, I guarantee you, if it's successful enough, we will. But the internet has been blowing up about the Suicide Squad trailer, and a lot of people have been comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy. What's your take on that, Eric?
I kind of touched on that, but I don't think they're going to make use of classic top 40 songs in the way they did just because it had Bohemian Rhapsody. But I mean, it's a ragtag group of misfits, and one criticism I've seen of the trailer, and it's the opposite of the Batman versus Superman. They gave away the entire movie. It's it's just a catchy song over a bunch of random images from a movie. That's what trailers are.
Yes, and it's all trailers are.
That's what trailers have always been.
Yeah, what people really need to do is they need to spend 15 minutes watching trailers on YouTube. Watch a trailer that was shot in 1985. Watch one that was shot in 1990, and then watch one that's been shot since the 2000s. And you will see there is a significant difference in quality I mean, like Ghostbusters
I mean,
is one
it's
of
not
the
as phenomenal as the trailers for the first two Death Wish movies, but
right.
when, when,
I
when
was gonna
you
say
have a death
Ghostbusters was
wish,
one of
a
the
death
best.
wish comes true, and you will love it.
Ghostbusters is one of the best movies of the 80s, one of the best comedies ever. And if you've ever seen the theatrical trailer for that movie, it is sorely lacking in quality. I mean, only nostalgia could make that you appreciate that trailer for what it is and the knowledge of the film. But if you showed that trailer to someone who's never seen Ghostbusters, it would not make them want to go see that movie. It would not make them want to go see that movie. Not in 2016. They would go, this movie looks pretty stupid. It looks boring. It
I'm
doesn't
not
look
sure.
funny.
I'm not sure if anyone's going to see Ghostbusters in 2016, and you know what I mean.
That's a good point. But no, I mean, but I'll tell you what, that'll be the perfect example when when the trailer drops for the new Ghostbusters movie. You're going to see how much better the trailer is. Even though I guarantee that movie is going to be garbage, I guarantee the trailer will be exceptional by comparison to the original Ghostbusters trailer. But yeah, these things are sizzle reels. I mean, there's a reason that they call. They pull out the hottest footage. They pull out stuff that really just it explodes on screen, quite literally and figuratively, and they make people get interested in wanting to know what more is in the film. I love the fact that you can't please a single damn person in the world. I mean, you definitely can't please everybody. You're always going to have people who are going to complain that the trailer was too short, the trailer was too long, the trailer gave away too much, the trailer didn't give away enough. I don't want to know. I think one of the boons that this trailer has going for it is the fact that we don't even know what the threat is yet, but you get the idea that it's really bad. Like, you know what I'm saying? The reason we get that is it's kind of like, yeah, we're pretty sure we're going to send all these people to their death, hence the Suicide Squad, because there's a pretty big threat, and we don't know how to stop it. And it's like this is the government talking. You know what I'm saying? It's like this is the government talking. We're going to let people with powers or freaks or whatever they call them, metahumans or whatever they decide to use. We're going to let them fight their own, and if they die, fuck them, they're criminals. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting take, and I'm glad that they didn't fully give away who the big threat is, because it's
I'm pretty sure that not everyone's going to make it out of this movie alive, and their names are probably El Diablo, Slipknot, and Enchantress.
I think that Slipknot is definitely going to die, and again, spoiler if you haven't seen the trailer, he is in the very beginning of the footage, and then he is in no other footage in the rest of the trailer, which obviously you can't always tell. We had this discussion about Spectre's trailer. You can't always tell chronologically where things happen based on a trailer, but you can get an idea, and you can tell that during the introduction of these characters, when they're basically released from their prisons, we see Slipknot, we see him in no other footage. He is going to be the example. They're going to blow his head off of his shoulders, and I'm going to love every moment of it, because who cares about that character? He has metal ropes, for God's sakes. El Diablo might, like I said, although I'm interested in the El Diablo character just because he looks like he's a powerhouse and he could be a fun, interesting character. Yeah, he probably will die. I don't know about Enchantress though, because Cara Delevingne, is that her? I believe that's her name. She's kind of an up and comer, and I think it would be a, I don't want to say a bad idea, but I think that to kill off one of the up and coming actors in your movie.
Yeah, I just say we can probably agree they're not going to kill Deadshot, Harley Quinn, or the Joker.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident they're not going to kill the Joker. I am 100% certain they're not going to kill Harley Quinn. I'll tell you what, I'm not 100% convinced about Deadshot, but I'm pretty confident that they're not. But Enchantress, yeah, I just Rick Flag, he'll probably live. Maybe Killer Croc. I just don't know. I'll tell you what, Katana, that's another thing. She's another character who holds some interest, but they just didn't give her enough screen time. Her sword steals the souls of people. I mean, that's just awesome. So,
you about ready to move on?
yeah, we beat that horse dead, but
yeah, we'll be talking Suicide Squad a bit more this year, and probably definitely do a review on it. We're going to take a little bit of time here since it's not something we've been able to do in our past few episodes. We'll talk comics again. I'll
Comics,
actually,
those things that all the movies you love are based on.
yeah, I will be heading to the shop tomorrow just because I haven't been to the comic shop at all this month because as Josh knows, I really haven't had to go out to the comic shop as
Hate your
much
guts.
because, yeah, DC has really been spoiling me with books for the past few months. And
God bless
I
them.
will list what I've read and reviewed this week. All my reviews for this week are already posted at darkknightnews.com, so you can see them there as well as a few titles. The Some of my other staffers have posted, and they've done a fine job with. But as for me, I've some of these books DC has sent me digitally. Some are sent to me physically. But this week you can look at my review for Adventures of Supergirl #1, which is a digital first series. Very impressive debut, ties into the TV show. So if you like the show, read the comic. It's like 99 cents for a download. But if you want to read it all at once, a trade paperback is slated to be out this year. Black Canary #7, really didn't care for that one. Um, let's see, Suicide Squad, Most Wanted, Deadshot and Katana #1. Pretty cool book. You're essentially getting two comic books in one, $4.99 cover price. Um, and, we were talking characters you may not know as well. Everyone knows the Joker and Harley Quinn, but unless you've seen Deadshot and Katana and Arrow, this is a good chance to get to know those two characters. Again, cover price is a little more than what you pay, but again, like I said, it's two comics in one. So, and it's worth your time. I thought the Deadshot one was a little better than the Katana one, but you can go ahead and read my review on DKN. It's going to be a 6-issue miniseries, but the first issue is pretty impressive. So this looks like it's going to be one to stick with, hopefully. Um, let's see, Superman #48 was a pretty decent read. We're on the road to Superman getting his powers back, which looks like will happen in #50 in March, and we're it's also dealing with this whole Savage Dawn crossover right now. But it wasn't a perfect issue, but I enjoyed it. Let's see. Also from Vertigo this week, we have Jacked #3, which is Jacked from Eric Kripke, creator of Supernatural. Happens to be my favorite book from the Vertigo line right now. I recommend people look at that series. Twilight Children #4, just the conclusion. And then Vertigo Quarterly SFX #4 also hit this week. $7.99 cover price, but it was a pretty good anthology style book. That's probably more so one for Vertigo diehards, but I did a more in-depth review of that. So if you do like Vertigo comics and have read the quarterlies, you probably can't go wrong with that. There's another comic which will remain nameless, and we're not going to tell why on the air, but let's just say that review's no longer up, and not for reasons the creators may think. Let's just say a lot of talks going on with that behind the scenes right now, and yeah, that's where we're going to leave it with that book that will not be named.
Hashtag
Um,
censorship.
huh?
Hashtag censorship.
No, maybe self-censorship. Just hashtag
Frustrating.
unprofessionalism by the creators. If unprofessionalism is even a word, we'll just say unprofessional. There you go. Hashtag crybaby. Hashtag Eric doesn't understand punk rock, but hashtag Eric's a fan of Norwegian black metal and punk rock sounds like Captain and Tennille to him. Sorry if I just alienated any punk rock fans, but don't forget there are forms of music on Earth way more extreme than yours. But anyway, yeah, so pretty decent week for comics. you're interested in any of more of the team up books, um, as I said, some of my other review crew members have posted those on DKN. But Josh, it did. You stopped by your comic shop this week, and if not, what have you been reading lately?
Yeah, I actually stopped by last week, but I have not had a chance to go this week, so I'm gonna probably go later this afternoon. That being said, that I read digital quite a bit, and although I still collect physical issues, I don't tend to read them in physical copy anymore. I don't know that I don't like it. I mean, there's certain books that I like to have in my hands, but it. I've been collecting forever, so I know people are like, "You're not a comic book fan if you only read digital." No. I've been collecting for 20 plus years. I've got God, I've lost count of how many long boxes I've got, but no, digital is just easy consumption. It's like saying you're not a true TV fan if you're not watching it on your actual TV, but you're instead watching it on a mobile device or a tablet. You don't like TV. That's absurd. It's totally ridiculous. So anyway, that being said, I've been reading a lot of digital, and I've been catching up on. I've been catching a lot of a backstory of a few different comics, so like Tech, which is if you're a nerd, it's Detective Comics. I've been reading some backlog of that. I've been reading some backlog of Superman, Wonder Woman, which I don't know how it managed to happen, but somehow it got off of my poll, and I missed a few issues, and I'm not sure why or what. That issue's been corrected. But that being said, I have finally finished Why the Last Man, or as I like to call it, Y, El Último Hombre. It was a little bit of a disappointing finish, but that was an enjoyable series. I know it took me a really long time to finish. It took me about a year and a half to fully read that just because I've got so many other things going on. But that's a very enjoyable series if you ever get a chance to pick it up and trade. Why the Last Man, Brian K. Vaughan, I believe, is the author. It's an enjoyable run. You could probably read it in a couple weeks, and I finally finished up that. Last but not least, I have been reading Superman, but I don't think I've read the most recent issue. And then Justice League, of course. But I've been reading a lot of other stuff as well. I'm just trying to remember all of it. Yeah, I think that I'll cut it at that because I can't remember. I read that's the other thing about reading digital is I read way more comic books than you do. Maybe not you, Eric, but you read more comics than anyone. But I consume more comic books, television, and movies than like probably 95 to 98% of the population. Like unless you're unless you're doing it professionally, like I probably am reading more comic books than you. And that's not me like bragging, but ever since digital comics became a thing, it's just consumption is 10 times as easy, and so I don't have to bag them, board them, put them in my long box, and make sure they're in immaculate condition with every single comic book that I read. No, I just bust through an entire series. So it's one of the reasons I love trades. It's another reason I love reading series is I've actually already come to a conclusion. My buddy Marius picked up Preacher, and he's been talking to me about that quite a bit. I've only read a few issues of that, so I'm thinking about maybe picking up a Preacher trade and giving that a try. I'm just not as familiar with that comic. But,
yeah, I was going to say, too, with the digital thing, like we mentioned, Adventures of Supergirl, some of DC's digital first books are not going to be collected into print issues. They're just going to go straight to trade paperback because, for those who read books such as Smallville Season 11 or
Adventures of Superman,
Arrow Season 2.5, they would collect, I believe, 3 digital chapters into one print issue. And then eventually they got their trade paperback release. But Adventures of Supergirl, I believe Arrow, The Dark Archer, I think that's the full title. And then Wonder Woman 77, those are all they're going to do the digital chapters, and then they just go straight to trade paperback when they're done. There won't be any print issues. So if you want to keep up with them while they're ongoing, digital is the only way to go right now for certain titles.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually have certain comics, whether it be Marvel, DC, or any other comic book imprint. I wouldn't be surprised if it was digital only eventually. I mean, I know
I
that
think there'll still be trades because think of something like Arrow. Fans of the TV series, I talk to people who only buy trade paperbacks, and they're the more casual fans. So someone who's a fan of Arrow and doesn't really read comics but wants to at least read some, they can easily just go out and buy these trade paperbacks, and I think DC knows that.
Yeah, now if only they could get on mark with their actual regular trade releases of their collected books, as we've discussed before. But we're at the hour, Eric. Let's wrap it up. Final words?
Not really. There's Josh and I have kind of discussed what we're going to do with a few upcoming episodes. We want to do at least a few more, so you still might get a few more episodes like rapid fire before they become more sporadic, and we just really talk about things when we feel we have a need to talk about them. But we had the premiere of Lucifer this week, so we're thinking we should probably talk about that at some point, having another DC TV show on the air.
Yeah, we wanted to give it its own episode, or at the very least, its own.
Yeah, we don't know if we're gonna, make that the, number one talking point of an upcoming episode, but we might at least insert it somewhere into one sometime soon, because it really is something we should talk about. But maybe we'll have an episode up in about another week or two. But in the meantime, I will plug our sites for all the latest Batman news across all forms of media. Be sure to check out darkknightnews.com for all the latest news regarding the DC universe abroad across all forms of media. Check out dccomicsnews.com. For our backlog of podcasts and other miscellanea, check out our blog site, multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com. Although it is not affiliated with this podcast, check out WeGotThisCovered.com, a great entertainment site that I write for. And like us on Facebook at facebook.com/podcast for all seasons. So until next time, thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys, and be sure to listen. We it's very possible we might have a very special Waitangi Day episode. No, that probably won't happen. But yeah, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and have a good night.